I used to show up here at 7 o'clock in the morning. This was Juilliard when
Oh, that's
when I
right.
went. Yeah,
oh,
this was
right.
Juilliard.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd show up as soon as the building opened, before class. My dad and I, God rest his soul, we used to walk to work. He was at labor. He'd walk with his tool case. Maybe that's why I carry my trombone all the time. He'd walk with his tool case and to the train. I'd walk with him. We'd go to work, and I wouldn't come home till late at night. My mother or father would pick me up at the train. I lived at home up until my last half year at Juilliard. We couldn't afford, you know, I come from my three brothers in the same room, that kind of thing. You know, it was a shot in the dark, even to become a trombone, my older brother was a cab driver. My options would be a school teacher, which is honorable. My whole family is teachers. My son's a superintendent. My daughter's a high school history teacher. My wife's a retired kindergarten. My daughter-in-law teaches special ed. I taught for a year. When I got out of Juilliard, the Vietnam War was raging. I taught for a year in a special service school where one of our teachers were murdered. My colleague, my music teacher colleague, was murdered there. So the Army gave you a deferment for that. So I taught too, and middle school, Macon Junior High. And I had no expectations. I think one of the most important things is not to have too many expectations. I mean, go where you go. You know, I always went where I was wanted the most. I just tried my best. Always warm up for gigs. I never showed up to a gig. Maybe I can count them, literally, in 45, 50 years of playing gigs, show up not warmed up. Because somebody might hear you. You can't play at your prime.
That's great advice for younger players, because
you can't play.
If you still keep that philosophy, you're
Totally,
obviously at the top of your game.
Totally. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do, I get out of bed and have a cup of coffee in the practice room. If you could put in 45 minutes, a half hour, first thing in the morning, you carry that with you the whole day. So then it's just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it catches up with you if you don't warm up. It's going to be bad things.
And you know, when you're in the studio, you really want to get it the first time through.
Yeah.
That's what's expected. You know, that kind of thing.
So
although I don't do that with like when I'm in an orchestra, I guess at the beginning, you know, sometimes it's more important to play great rehearsals than a great concert. Because everybody's listening to you during the rehearsals, you know. That's a terrible thing to say, but for me, now, over the last 30 years, I play terrible at rehearsals because now I'm experimenting. Everybody knows what to expect. I can't play rehearsals. I'm messing up stuff because I'm experimenting. What do I want to do? How do I want to wig this out? Pick my spots, bop, 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 and then at the concert, I just go. Yeah.
Cool. So back to your solo career. I remember in that, I think you even commissioned pieces at that early recital I went to in the 80s at 92nd Street Y, but it's well documented in articles and interviews that you've done, how much you've commissioned for the bass trombone, and by world-class composers, Charles Warren and Erica Ways and David Liebman, David Schneider. I mean, that's Daniel Schneider. Sorry. Schneider.
Right.
It's
easy.
I have it in my mind that I'm going to say it wrong, so of course I say it wrong.
Next year we got proposed, we're going to record and play this concerto. The conductor's name is Schneider, his name is Schneider, and actually Taylor in German is a Schneider, is a Taylor. So we're calling the concert Schneider, Schneider, Taylor. That's going to be the concert.
Count me out as the MC. Anyway, my apologies for mispronouncing his name, but it's a beautiful piece.
He wrote me a whole repertoire, that guy. I mean, he wrote us a whole repertoire. I was playing in George Gruntz's band, a European band, great band, and we were in Zurich. This must have been 25 years ago, I don't know. And we were playing in an airplane hangar. At that time, I used to play these crazy solos. George would write me these pieces where he would feature my idiosyncratic solo, it was very influenced by guys like Luciano Berio, Charles Ives, and blues. You know, so he made room for me there, and he was the first guy to bring me over to Europe. George, he just passed away, God rest his soul, and great bands. I mean, Elvin Jones, Joe Henderson. Joe Henderson and Lee Konitz were sitting in front of me for one of these whole tour. We used to go out to dinner, and I pumped them both. Because one of them is conscious of every note. One of them floats over the notes.
Right.
George had me soloing on Inner Urge.
Wow.
Right. And
how'd Joe like that?
Well, Joe was sitting right in front of me, and every time, he and I became friends, and every time I'd come back, yeah, Dave, And I felt he meant it, whether he did or not. I felt he meant it. And very, very positive spirit with me. I mean, it was like a...
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, he was terrific.
Well, talk a little bit about your
Oh, yeah,
philosophy
so
as far as commissioning and how you got into that and what the reaction was from the composers. And you've built like a very impressive a body of work in terms of the works that have been written for you.
I'm actually very proud of that.
Yeah,
Well, basically, it was based in the most positive sense on I wanted to learn. I wanted to be at the cutting edge of what, you have to remember, when I was learning how to play the bass trombone in the 60s, that was when the double valve came into existence. Before that, bass trombone was not a chromatic instrument. It stopped at low E, then it picked up again at B flat, And then with the single valve, you couldn't get a low B. Is that what I said? It wasn't totally chromatic.
right. You couldn't go all the way down
Couldn't
from
go all the
low
way
E
down,
down to B
right,
flat.
right.
Yeah.
So, but when the second valve came in, I luckily picked up on that. I and a handful of guys who really developed the low range facility really quickly. And so the bass trombone increased exponentially, its possibilities. I always wanted to be as expressive as a violin. That was my goal. That was my dream. And not make people aware of the fact that you're playing on a bass trombone, So I wanted to learn from the most advanced and best minds, and I also wanted to play in major venues. Like my first, Alan Hovhaness, you know that name? Sure. He wrote a concerto for me. And I premiered it at Alice Tully Hall. Now, I'd never played a solo, stuff like that, That was my first time. The papers gave me great reviews. Oh, it was fantastic. New York Times and everything. Mr. Taylor plays superbly, but watching him can make you seasick. That was, because, I move around a lot when I play.
I've noticed that. Yeah, interesting.
Right. So for a whole year, I went playing solos with various orchestras, sitting down, trying to break myself of that habit. But that's who I am. Yeah. So I eventually said, that's who I am, and that's who I am. And I'll tell you something, too. I mean, I'm getting up there in years, but I still, thank God, I still can play. A lot of guys, they develop problems where they can't play. And I'm wondering if the moving around is a good way for me to keep that thing, I don't know.
Could be.
Some people say, hey, when you point that thing at us in a different way, it's almost like Doppler color changes. I was a friend of Ron Carter's, a big fan of his colors. Anything that gives me colors. I like colors, anything that gives me colors. But the Daniel Schnyder thing, so he heard me playing with George Grunz over in Zurich. And the next day we were eating lunch, a bunch of us at an outdoor cafe, and this skinny guy comes up to me and says, and we became, usually I'm gruff with people like that, but for somehow with him, it was cool. And then we'd have a trio together with Kenny Drew Jr. So he wrote me a whole trio repertoire that everybody's playing now, duo repertoire, sonata, concerto. We got another concerto we've been playing. And we're going to be in May, we're going to be in California playing with the Orchestra of the Pacific. In the summer, we're going to be playing in Austria. And, we play a lot.
Yeah.
Big influence on my career and life. And friendship. We're very good friends. I'm Santa Claus for his children.
That's good.
Yeah, I dress up like Santa for the last
Not everybody has a Jewish Santa. That's good. Right. That's good stuff.
That's right. Oh, somebody said to me, I always knew Santa was Jewish. I forget who said that to me. But, right.
Well, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that.
I met him. John Rojak was taking lessons from me. You know who he is? John Rojak?
Of course. Yeah, sure.
And he was taking lessons from me, and I said, hey, man, I'm looking for a guy. Oh, he says, I'm going to school with a guy named Eric Ewazen.
Oh, wow. That's how it started. Wow.
That's how it started. So I went down to Eric, and again, that's what I'm saying. I was living up in the Bronx at the time, so that must have been in the late 70s or something, really. So my career, I've always had that goal in mind. A lot of the guys made fun of it. Oh, man, come on, But, I stuck it out. So that's a big thing, too. What do they call that? When you want immediate gratification? And I'm not one for immediate gratification. I was very lucky that way.
Well, you certainly persevered, and
Yeah.
I mean that in the
Yeah,
most
I was very
positive
lucky.
way. It's
Oh, I
like
know.
that's a hard thing to
You
to
got to
build.
remember, I didn't have a Victrola, that's what we used to call record players, until I was like 16. My whole, everything was like fortuitous with me. It was like luck, being in the right place at the right time. I was an avid black and white movie freak. And in a lot of the old gangster movies, there's all that hot jazz, right? And Louis Armstrong and a bunch of whoever else. You know, and so I used to watch that stuff and listen to those soundtracks day and night. I was a major R&B and rock and roll AM radio guy. That's where I got my whole education. When I got into Juilliard, I forgot to tell you, after that first year of rudimentary learning, they put me in the L&M 1. They have a literature and materials of music thing. And I actually was lucky enough to have lessons with the guy who originated that, Arnold Fish. There was two guys, I forget the other guy's name. He knew I was backward in terms of orchestral music. I didn't know anything about it. So he used to assign me a record every week that I would have to. And the other guy who I just lucked out into was Hall Overton. I don't know if you know who that is.
I don't.
Hall Overton was the guy who did all the monk charts for the Jazz and Philharmonic in Town Hall.
Oh, wow,
And
okay.
he took to me.
Wow.
I think I got to meet Liebman that way. And Eddie Daniels, I got to meet him and through that whole...
Eddie had one of my favorite lines. He played on one of my records, or a couple of my records, and I was always a huge fan of his playing. And the first time he came in, he walked in and he saw that I played trombone, and he says, "Wow, look at this, the two bastard instruments together for a recording session."
That's it.
It's like,
That's it.
and then, of course, meanwhile, he just completely slayed the thing, and it sounded phenomenal.
When I was playing that angular trombone, a lot of the cats at Juilliard, the students, they didn't understand what. But Eddie dug Hall, and Eddie had just won this jazz award or something like that. And I keep telling, because Eddie and I have become friendly, so he and Hall teamed up and let the kids know, hey, this cat is, yeah, they kind of put
good
a nice
stuff.
little front, yeah.
You know, just to touch on Eric Weiss, and again, I know he's done a lot of work with you. I mean, I was up at New England Conservatory last week for their brass bash event, and they did one of his pieces. He's like the preeminent brass writer now to me. I mean, it's just such beautiful brass
I wrote
writing.
a concerto last year, and I played it at the ETW. And he's so open, this cat. He said, "Look, we gotta get this published with my publishing company."
Nice.
That's the kind of guy.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
No, he's a great guy.
Let's move on to you as a teacher, as if your playing schedule isn't busy enough. But you clearly have a passion for it. You have a philosophy behind it. You're on the faculty here at Manhattan School of Music. You're on the faculty at Mannes. Of course, you travel year round
New
and
school.
give. Oh, and New School as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
New School.
And you travel and give master classes around the world on a regular basis. I'd love to hear your thought process about teaching. And the other thing I want to ask you, which is a lot more specific, I know I've talked to several of your students who are a huge fan of you as a teacher, and they're
I'd like to know why, actually, in this
very
conversation.
talented young players.
Right.
I think some of it, just to address it, I think the freedom, but yet a level of constraint, but there is some freedoms within that.
First thing I do is I play duets with them. That way I know who's practicing, who's not.
Yeah. But
As soon as they walk in that room.
In addition to, it's like a two-part answer to this question, but this, how do you feel or address the fact that there's these super talented young players who dream of being the next Dave Taylor, and they're going out into a world that at best is overcrowded and at worst is virtually non-existent? How do you, as a teacher, how do you just kind of come to grips with that, and how do you move forward with that?
I think the first thing is they see how I'm still so into it, and that it's a never-ending process of failure and success. And I push for failure. You know, going back to that thing about experimenting with personality and the music and this and that. If you're going to be doing this, you should be a lifer. I mean, a lifer is, you know, this is what you want to do, you know. And I want them to go out. First, the first principle I have is those who stay in the building will stay in the building. That's the very first premise. So what I do is shove them out. I get them out in the street right away, and I want them, because that's where you learn. You can make school your street. I try to do that too. The way you make school your street is you try to really get around peer pressure. In my classes, I have chamber music classes. I really go the extra mile to let them know that I'm a believer in failure, so you can't fail here, you know. I let them know that school is a safe harbor. You fail out there, we'll get you back up and running. If you're studying with me, that means you understand that you want to do something that a lot of people perhaps aren't doing. As soon as a guy wants to study with me, I mean, I know I'm a kind of a, I wouldn't say oddball in the academe thing, but I'm on, you know, I think I'm the only faculty member here in both classical and jazz divisions. Manus is the classical division of New School. So I'm on the both classical and jazz divisions of both these pretty important institutions.
Sure.
So if they're going to study with me, they kind of know why they're studying with me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. My basic thing is technique, but I played with so many great jazz musicians over the last 50 years. I mean, man, I can't believe it when I say it. I can't believe. I tell you the truth, man. I'm at a point where I can't believe who I've worked with, man. It's like it's insane. So when they play for me, I have them just blow, or I have them bring in a little group, and I just say, no, it bores me. No, come on, no, take it out, man. Let's go. A little more inside. Gil Evans used to say to me when I was talking about improvisation, every now and then give them a guidepost, meaning the audience. Every now and then, let them know where it is, and then you get. So I carry. Or Thad Jones used to say to me, "It's only a half step away," that kind of thing. Gil Evans. So that's how I have them read. I have them read artists and painters and poets and writers on music, on their careers. It's hard. I'm talking nonstop.
Biographies and things
Biographies,
like that. That gives
essays.
them
Essays. That's Gil. I used to give Gil books to read. Like I gave him the John Cage books to read, Auguste Rodin books to read, and he would give me music to listen to. He always used to love the books I gave him because you didn't have to start at the beginning. You could pick up those books at any place and you're right there. And just to give you an example, like you get a guy like Henry Miller, the writer who wrote Tropic of Cancer and all those books that were banned in the country at first. So you read about how he developed his technique. He finally realized that he has to write about himself on a daily basis. He gives examples, and he starts talking about artists and the risks they must take. Like an artist who jumps in a pool wearing a life preserver, it'll be the life preserver that sinks him. You must take risk, and you must jump over the cliff. Or you read about Allen Ginsberg, the poet, who used to do all his schoolwork like he was supposed to, but every day he would write these nonsense things in a little scrapbook he kept. And it became that scrapbook of nonsense things that was his style, the basis of his style. And his failures, and you see all the artists' failures. Or one great thing, Auguste Rodin, the painter, the sculpture, he did The Thinker.
Of course.
I read a line in those essays that just blew me away and enabled me to be less conscious about myself when I performed. And you got time for that?
Yeah.
Don't forget, he was a sculptor and an artist. There is no such thing as beautiful color. Can you imagine that, an artist saying that? There's no such thing as beautiful color. There's no such thing as beautiful lines. Don't forget, he's a sculptor. He's saying there's no such thing as beautiful form. He's a sculptor. No such thing as beautiful form. He says there's only one beauty, and that's the beauty of truth revealing itself. That's a very big thing for me. And what does that do? I mean, we can't always accomplish that. I mean, Thad used to tell me he could hear 2 choruses in advance sometimes. Dizzy would kind of talk kind of in those terms. The beauty of truth revealing itself means that's who you are at the moment, you know? And I always use examples of Miles and the technique or non-technique or whatever he developed into. And I remind them that at this age, though, don't be Glenn Gould at the last
Right.
Goldberg Variations recording. You gotta
Don't start at the end.
Don't start at the end, you know. But I always let them know what it's like along the way. And I also let them know that originality isn't necessarily something you are born with or without development. Talent is just the opening the door, man. You know, it's like that type of stuff.
Yeah, well, you just said a lot of great stuff. And I was saying it earlier, my oldest son is in the pre-college division here, and I'm gonna play him that answer because I think he said a lot of good stuff that all young people should listen to. There's some very good information there.
But then again, there's another great, there was another great teacher, who, I think from Eastern, it could have been Remington, I don't know who that was, but he said, well, I get great students and just try not to rude them. You know,
well, I'm sure there's a balance of that for you too. You're going to attract great students.
You don't want to turn the guy off to music. You don't want to strict him up. You don't want to give him school days. He's getting enough school days in school. You know, so you try to make it like I say, a safe harbor.
Yeah.
You know.
Give me
and he doesn't have to play like me.
Yeah.
That's another big one. You don't have to do what I do. You know.
Well, you've always been a proponent of originality and expressiveness, so I would expect that you would extend that to your students. Give me a quick answer to this. I've been to your many performances of yours. We've obviously played together many times over the years. What's your thought process when you repeat a performance? Like you get to the end of a piece and you're not happy with it. And the reason I ask this is it almost seems contrary to what you think as a musician because you think you just got to keep going no matter what. If you make a mistake, keep going. You do your best, then it's over. But I'm not saying that I'm saying it in a negative or positive way. I'm just curious what your philosophy is in terms of when you repeat a piece after you've performed it on the same concert.
The main thing about getting a piece across is getting a piece across. And if it doesn't get across, man, I mean, there are times when I won't, you know, I don't repeat more than I do repeat.
Of course.
But I remember the first time I did that. I was playing, I had a brass quintet when I was at Juilliard. When I started playing the bass drum, a lot of guys wanted to work with me. Ronnie Rahm, who became the trumpet player in the Canadian brass, was part of the group. David Jolly, a very well-known French horn player. Bob Cyranak, who's now the manager of the orchestra of the Metropolitan Opera, and a friend Garrett List, who's teaching in Belgium all these years. We had a brass quintet, New York Brass Society. And we actually had a manager, Eastman Boomer was his name.
Nice name for a manager.
And we had records out, we did concerts. We did one concert tour. Where's Kansas? Is that the Midwest? Or where
I think that's safe to say, yeah, Midwest, I would say, yeah.
We were at Wichita and all these places.
Tell me you didn't think it was on the West Coast.
No, I knew it was the West Coast, but I was thinking Cowboys. You hear Wichita, man, so Cowboys is the West. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, we were out there. We were playing Ewald 1. Da, 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 da. That's the opening tuba line. And I didn't do it. I just stopped. Everybody was aghast because nobody was doing that, man.
Too many cowboys running around, or was it actually?
No, because it's interesting. On that concert tour, Michael Powell, you know who plays in the American Brass Quintet, comes up to me and says, you know, when I heard you playing that brass quintet, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that nice?
That's
man?
cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Nice. I said, yeah, I was very flattered by that. At any rate, that's another thing, too.
Finish that story. Finish the story about it, because I know you have a point in there.
So I repeated it, and I played it well. I kind of chilled myself out, or whatever it was, right? I played it well.
Would it be?
I did this in Washington, D.C. once. I was playing with the amp and the note, and the band got off. I got off. I don't know who got off. We got off. Maybe I was being too free. Maybe I wasn't being free enough. I don't know what it was. Audience was aghast. I was even a little upset about that. I did my thing. I started again. And the next day at the master class I was given, I did a bang-up job, blah, blah, blah. And one of the people asked me, Mr. Taylor, what happened last night that you stopped and blah, blah? Well, I said, you know, I don't know what happened. We got off, but at this point in my career, I don't have to lie to anybody about anything. I don't want to lie, man. When I'm playing, I just don't want to lie. Oh, incidentally, you're allowed to lie in music. You were that, right? You're allowed to compensate at the end of a phrase. You know, but I don't want to lie. I knew something was up. I just didn't want to lie, and that happened to me several times. Once I was doing a concert at the University of Indiana. I was very difficult piece. And you know, it's almost starting off a concert career on an instrument that's not concert career material. It's not only hard getting the repertoire, it's hard getting the gig.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
So what I would do is I'd piggyback. Like there was one time I played a concert in Holland. I was over there with the Mingus Epitaph Band, with Gunther Schuller, and I did a recital for all the trombone players in Holland. And it was in Halverstrom. And the rehearsals went great, but I had to play a all-day rehearsal with the Epitaph thing, and then I had to run right to do this recital. And in the middle of it, I forgot to tell the guy, get me food. Get me a bottle of water, you know what I mean? And the guy who was promoting the thing, he was gone. He didn't know what, you know. So I got to that gig, and I struggled through the gig. Piggyback. Or one time at University of Indiana, I played this difficult concert. The rehearsals went great, but then they had me teaching because they couldn't afford to bring me out there for any length of time. They had me meeting with the teachers at 6 a.m., then teaching from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock. By the time I got to that concert, it was like, I had to repeat things. The most important thing is to make the music happen. And if it requires me to do the ego sublimation thing, I don't do that. I'm playing now in front of a lot of times in front of 2,000-seat houses. You don't want to do that. You know, there's too much going on. I once did that with a whole symphony orchestra. You might have been in the audience, where I had the whole symphony orchestra repeat the concert, repeat the concerto.
I was, yeah.
The lights went out in the middle of the concert, and I said, well, and I'm playing, the lights go out, and the conductor says, I will repeat the movement. I said, right. We repeated I insisted they repeat the whole thing. That was the Schneider piece, because the leader, they were doing this for radio, and I was afraid that my friend wouldn't get the royalties from the radio show.
Okay,
Business
fair
is
enough.
Business is my friend, man. I mean,
got to make that car payment.
No, I wanted him to get on a radio show. That was a big thing, but I don't think those boys have recovered yet. Although I went out to Slide Factory last year. I guess they recovered.
Okay, well, that's good.
Am I being not dignified enough here, Davis?
No. I think
Plenty
dignified
of
is the word I would use.